I stood there in the back row of that fancy auditorium, my legs aching from a double shift at the warehouse and my hands still greasy from fixing a carburetor that morning. The air smelled like perfume and polished wood, nothing like the oil and sweat I'm used to. My eyes burned from lack of sleep. For hours a night for 6 years will do that to a man, but I couldn't stop staring at the stage. Camille was up there, my wife, glowing in her cap and gown, a doctor at last. I dreamed of this moment as much as she had. Every paycheck I'd handed over, every late-night Uber run, every time I said no to a beer with the guys so I could pay her tuition, it was all for this. My chest swelled with pride, and I thought, we did it. Babe. We really did it. The crowd clapped as she crossed the stage, her smile wide and bright, her dark hair shining under the lights. I adjusted my tie, borrowed from a buddy because I never owned one, and waited for her to look my way. She didn't. She floated down the steps, and I started pushing through the crowd, my boots heavy on the carpeted floor. I wanted to hug her, to tell her how proud I was, how every sacrifice was worth it. But then she stopped near a group of her med school friends, all dressed in suits and dresses that cost more than my truck. A man stepped up beside her, tall, sharp-looking, with a suit that fit like it was made for him. His hair was slicked back, and he had this easy confidence I could never pull off. Camille grabbed his arm, her face lighting up even more, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "This is my husband, Julian. He's the reason I'm here today." The words hit me like a wrench to the gut. Husband? Julian? I froze, my breath stuck somewhere between my lungs and my throat. The crowd clapped again, polite and happy, and I just stood there, a ghost in my own life. My hands clenched into fists, the calluses rubbing against each other, reminding me of every hour I'd worked for her. 6 years of my life, poured into her dream, and she didn't even glance my way. I watched her laugh, her head tilting back like she used to do with me, and Julian smiled down at her like he'd been there all along. My ears rang, drowning out the chatter around me. I wanted to scream, to march up there and demand answers, but my feet wouldn't move. All I could do was stare as the woman I loved, the woman I'd built this moment for, erased me without a second thought. I don't know how long I stood there, lost in the blur of clapping hands and flashing cameras. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Maybe I'd heard her wrong. Maybe it was a joke, some weird med school prank I didn't get. But then she leaned into Julian, her hand resting on his chest, and I saw the way her friends nodded, like they'd known him forever. My stomach twisted, and I felt the weight of every dollar I'd spent. Every night I'd come home to an empty bed because she was studying. I'd paid for that gown she was wearing, the textbooks she'd highlighted, the rent on her downtown condo while I slept in a one-room dump with a leaky roof. And now she was calling this guy her husband? My vision blurred, not from tears, I wouldn't let that happen, but from pure, raw shock. People moved around me, brushing past like I was invisible, and maybe I was. To them, I was just some guy in a borrowed tie, not the man who'd carried Camille through 6 years of hell. My heart pounded, loud and heavy, and I wondered if she'd ever planned to tell me. Did she think I'd just fade away, happy to be her stepping stone? I replayed her words in my head. He's the reason I'm here today, and they cut deeper each time. I was the reason she was there. Me. Mason Reed. Not Julian, whoever he was. I'd given up everything, my time, my money, my dreams, so she could have this. And now she was standing there, rewriting our story, handing my victory to someone else. I took a step back, my boots scuffing the floor, and the sound snapped me out of my daze. I couldn't stay there, surrounded by her new life, her new lie. My chest ached, but I straightened up, forcing air into my lungs. I wasn't going to fall apart, not here, not in front of her and her fancy crowd. I turned toward the exit, my mind spinning with questions I didn't have answers to. How long had this been going on? When did I stop being her husband? And why did she think she could just throw me away like I was nothing? As I pushed through the double doors into the cool night air, I felt the first crack in my world, but I didn't know then how deep it would go. All I knew was that Camille had taken everything I'd given her and handed it to someone else, and I wasn't sure what that left me with. I stood in that quiet hallway outside the auditorium, the muffled sound of laughter and clinking glasses seeping through the walls like a taunt. My hands were shoved deep in my pockets, the borrowed tie hanging loose around my neck now, like it didn't belong on me anymore. The air out here was cooler, but it didn't calm the heat rising in my chest. I kept replaying Camille's voice in my head. This is my husband, Julian, and every time it hit me, it felt like a punch I couldn't dodge. I wanted to believe I'd misheard her, that it was some kind of mistake, a slip of the tongue. Maybe she'd had too much champagne, or maybe I was just too tired to think straight after pulling a double shift. But deep down, I knew better. I'd seen the way she looked at him, the way her hand rested on his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. I leaned against the wall, the cold plaster pressing into my back, and stared at the polished floor. My boots looked out of place here, scuffed and worn next to the shiny tiles. I tried to piece it together. When did this happen? How long had she been calling this Julian guy her husband? My mind raced back through the last 6 years, searching for clues I'd missed. I'd been so busy working fixing cars, loading boxes, driving strangers around town that I hadn't noticed her slipping away. Or maybe I had, and I just told myself it was stress, med school pressure, nothing personal. I'd been a fool, hadn't I? A fool who thought love was enough to keep us together, even when she started spending more nights at the library than at home, even when her calls got shorter and her smiles got rare. The auditorium doors swung open, and a burst of noise spilled out, cheers, chatter, the kind of happiness I wasn't part of. I straightened up, wiping my palms on my pants, and that's when I saw Sadie, Camille's little sister, rushing toward me. Her eyes were wide, her face pale like she'd just seen a ghost. "Mason," she said, her voice shaky. "What are you doing out here?" "Did you hear what she said?" I nodded, slow and heavy, not trusting myself to speak yet. Sadie's mouth opened, then closed, like she didn't know what to say either. She glanced back toward the crowd, where Camille was still laughing with her friends, Julian at her side. "I don't understand," Sadie whispered, stepping closer. "She told me you were coming tonight. She said you'd be here for her." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "Guess she forgot to mention the part where I'm not her husband anymore," I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. Sadie's eyes darted between me and the auditorium, and I could see her trying to make sense of it. Same as me. She'd always been a good kid, 22 now, but still the same sweet girl who'd crashed on our couch when she needed a break from their mom. She'd seen me pay the bills, cook the dinners, keep the lights on while Camille studied. She knew the truth. "I'll talk to her," Sadie said, turning like she was about to march back in there. I grabbed her arm, gentle but firm. "Don't," I said. "Let her have her moment. I just need to know what's real." Before Sadie could argue, I heard Camille's voice again, louder this time, drifting out as the doors opened for someone else. "Mason?" "Oh, he's just a friend who helped me out when times were tough," she said, casual as if she were talking about borrowing a pen. My stomach dropped, and Sadie's head whipped around, her jaw tight. "A friend," she muttered, looking at me like she couldn't believe it either. I forced a shrug, even though it felt like my chest was caving in. "Guess that's what I am now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, I was breaking. 6 years of my life, reduced to just a friend. Every late night, every skip meal, every time I told her, "You've got this, babe," it was all nothing to her now. I peeked through the crack in the door, watching her. She was surrounded by her med school crew, smart, polished people who probably never had grease under their nails. Julian stood there, smirking like he owned the room, and next to him was a woman in a white coat, older, with sharp eyes, probably Dr. Simone Arnett, Camille's big shot mentor. They were all nodding, smiling, eating up her story. And then there was me, out here in the hallway, invisible. Sadie grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. "She's wrong, Mason. You're not just a friend. You're everything she's not saying." Her voice cracked, and I could tell she was mad at Camille, mad at the lie. I wanted to believe her, but all I could feel was the weight of being erased. I let go of Sadie's hand and stepped back, my head spinning. "I need air," I said, turning toward the exit. She called after me, but I kept walking, my boots echoing in the empty hall. Outside, the night was crisp, the stars hidden by city lights. I leaned against the building, sucking in deep breaths, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Part of me wanted to storm back in there, grab the mic, and tell everyone the truth, how I'd pawned my granddad's watch for her first semester, how I'd worked through fevers and exhaustion just to keep her in school. But what would that get me? A room full of pity? I didn't want their pity. I wanted my wife back. I wanted the life we'd planned, the one where we'd celebrate this together, not with me standing out here like some stranger. I rubbed my face, my hands rough against my skin, and thought about Julian. Who was he? Some rich guy she'd met at school? A doctor? A lawyer? He didn't look like he'd ever lifted anything heavier than a briefcase. And yet, she'd picked him to stand beside her, to take my place. My mind flashed to the time she'd come home late, saying she'd been studying with friends. Had he been one of them? Had she been building this other life right under my nose? I kicked the wall, the thud loud in the quiet, and cursed under my breath. I'd trusted her. I'd loved her. And now I was nothing to her, just a shadow she'd stepped over on her way to something better. Sadie's words stuck with me, though. You're everything she's not saying. Maybe she was right. Maybe Camille could rewrite our story for her fancy friends, but she couldn't erase the truth. I'd been there. Every step, every dollar, every tear. I wasn't just a friend. I was the man who'd held her up when she couldn't stand on her own. And as I stood there, the cold sinking into my bones, I realized something. I didn't need her to say it. I knew who I was. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her lie be the end of me. Not tonight. Not ever. I sat in my truck in the parking garage, the engine off, the keys dangling in my hand, just staring at the concrete wall ahead. The graduation ceremony was still buzzing in my head, Camille's voice, that guy Julian, the way she'd smiled like I didn't exist. My chest felt tight, like someone had parked a car on it, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I'd walked out of that hallway with Sadie's words ringing in my ears, but now, alone in the dark, all I could hear was Camille saying, Mason, he's just a friend. Just a friend. 6 years of my life, and that's what I got. I wanted to hit something, to scream, to make sense of it, but instead, I just sat there, the silence pressing in around me like a weight I couldn't shake. The garage was dim, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, casting shadows that danced across the dashboard. I'd parked here hours ago, full of pride, thinking I'd be driving home with my wife, the doctor, laughing about how we'd made it through. Now, I didn't even know where home was anymore. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Sadie checking on me, but I didn't look. I couldn't face her pity right now, or anyone's. I needed answers, and the only person who could give them to me was Camille. I'd seen her head toward the garage with Julian and her friends, all of them chattering like they were on top of the world. I'd waited, not sure why, until the crowd thinned out. Maybe I wanted her to see me, to remember I was still here. Maybe I just wanted to know how she could do this. I spotted her then, walking across the lot, her heels clicking on the pavement. Julian was with her, his arm around her waist, and they were heading for a sleek black car that looked like it cost more than I'd made in a year. My stomach twisted, but I pushed the door open and stepped out, my boots loud against the ground. Camille, I called, my voice rough, echoing off the concrete. She stopped, her head snapping toward me, and for a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes, shock, maybe guilt. Julian turned too, his eyebrows lifting like he was surprised I could talk. Mason, she said, her tone sharp, like I'd interrupted something important. What are you doing here? I took a step closer, my hands clenched at my sides. What am I doing here? I came to see my wife graduate. You know, the one I've been supporting for 6 years. My voice was louder than I meant it to be, but I didn't care. She flinched, glancing at Julian, then back at me. Mason, this isn't the time, she said, smoothing her hair like she could brush me off that easy. I've got people waiting. We can talk later. Later? After she'd just called some other guy her husband in front of everyone? I laughed, short and bitter, and it sounded wrong in the empty garage. No, Camille. We're talking now. Who the hell is this guy? I jerked my head toward Julian, who straightened up, his jaw tight like he was ready to step in. Camille's face hardened, and she crossed her arms. This is Julian. My husband. I thought you'd figured that out by now. Her words hit me like a slap, cold and final, and I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But she just stood there, her chin up, like she was daring me to argue. Your husband? I said, my voice cracking. Since when? Last I checked, I was the one you married. I was the one paying for all this. I waved a hand toward her gown, her fancy life. 6 years, Camille. I worked 3 jobs so you could stand on that stage tonight. And now you're telling me I'm nothing? She sighed, loud and dramatic, like I was the one being unreasonable. Mason, don't make this a scene. You were never part of this world. I couldn't have them thinking I came from nothing. Julian, he gets it. He's in this with me. Her words cut deeper than I thought they could, each one slicing through the years I'd spent believing in us. Nothing? I repeated, stepping closer, my voice low and shaking. I gave up everything for you. My granddad's watch, my weekends, my health gone, so you could have this. And you're standing there telling me I'm nothing? Julian moved then, putting a hand on her shoulder like he was protecting her from me. Look, man, he said, his voice smooth and smug. She's made her choice. You need to let it go. I turned on him, my fist itching to wipe that smirk off his face. You don't get to talk to me. I snapped. You don't know what I've been through for her. He raised his hands, backing off a step, but his eyes said he wasn't scared, just annoyed, like I was a bug he wanted to flick away. Camille stepped between us, her face cold now. Mason, stop. You've done a lot, okay? I'm grateful. You supported me when I needed it. But Julian's my future. He's where I'm going. You wouldn't understand the pressure I'm under. Pressure? I almost laughed again, but it caught in my throat. Pressure, I said, my voice rising. You think I don't know pressure? Try working 16 hours a day, coming home to a cold bed, eating ramen so you could have steak with your study group. I lived pressure so you wouldn't have to. And now you're throwing it back in my face. She didn't answer, just looked away, her lips pressed tight. Julian shifted, checking his watch like I was wasting his time. That's when it hit me. She wasn't even sorry. She'd planned this, maybe not from the start, but somewhere along the way. She'd decided I wasn't good enough, and she'd found someone who fit her new life better. I took a deep breath, forcing my hands to unclench. You're right, I said, quieter now, the fight draining out of me. I don't understand. I don't get how you can look at me and say that after everything. She met my eyes then, and for a second, I thought I saw something, regret. Maybe, but it was gone fast. I'm sorry it's like this, she said, her voice flat. But it's done. Go home, Mason. Go home. Like it was that simple. Like I could just walk away and forget the life I'd built for her. I stared at her, the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd carried, and I didn't recognize her anymore. Yeah, I said finally, turning back to my truck. I'll go. I didn't look back as I climbed in, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the garage, the tires screeching on the concrete. My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, and my eyes burned, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't give her that. She'd taken enough from me already. As I hit the open road, the city lights blurring past, I felt something shift inside me. She thought this was the end, that I'd just fade away. But she was wrong. My silence wasn't surrender. It was the start of something else, something she'd never see coming. I didn't know what yet, but I'd figure it out. I always did. I drove home that night with the windows down, the cold air whipping through the truck, trying to clear the fog in my head. Camille's words kept looping in my mind. You were never part of this world, and every time they hit, I felt the sting all over again. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the rough skin of my palms catching on the worn leather, and I couldn't stop thinking about the past 6 years. The truth of it, not her shiny new version. I pulled into the lot of my one-bedroom apartment, the place I'd kept so she could have her fancy condo near campus, and cut the engine. The silence settled in, heavy and thick, and I just sat there, staring at the cracked dashboard, letting the memories flood back. I needed to remember it all, every second I'd given her, because if I didn't, she'd win. She'd rewrite me out of her story, and I'd be left with nothing. It started 6 years ago, when Camille came home from her waitressing job with a wild look in her eyes. Mason, she'd said, dropping her apron on the couch, I want to be a doctor. I know it's crazy, but I can do it. I'd laughed at first, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. She had this fire in her, this dream she'd buried under years of late shifts and bad tips. I saw how much it meant to her, and I loved her for it. So I said, okay, babe, let's make it happen. I didn't know then what it'd cost me, but I'd have said yes anyway. That's what you do when you love someone. You jump in, even if the water's deep. We sat up all night, figuring it out. She'd need to quit her job, go back to school, take the hard classes first. And money, God, the money. Tuition, books, rent near the university. I told her I'd handle it. I'd make it work. The first semester was the toughest. I was still just a mechanic then, pulling decent hours, but it wasn't enough. I remember the day I took my granddad's watch to the pawn shop, a beat-up old thing he'd worn every day of his life. It wasn't worth much, maybe a couple $100, but it was all I had left of him. The guy behind the counter slid the cash over, and I felt a lump in my throat as I walked out. I didn't tell Camille where the money came from, just handed her the check for her first tuition payment and said, "You're on your way, babe." She hugged me so tight that night, her tears soaking my shirt, and I thought, this is it. This is us. I didn't care about the watch. I cared about her smile. After that, it was all a blur of work. I picked up the warehouse gig, loading boxes until my back screamed, then started driving Uber on weekends when the bills piled up. I come home at dawn sometimes, my eyes half open, and find her asleep on the couch with a textbook across her chest. I'd carry her to bed, her head heavy against my shoulder, and I'd feel this quiet pride. She was doing it, acing her classes, impressing her professors, and I was the one holding it all together. I missed things, though. My buddy's wedding, because I couldn't skip a shift. My mom's funeral, because the flight was too expensive, and Camille had a big exam that week. I told myself it was fine, that family would understand, but it ate at me. I'd sit in the dark sometimes, eating cold leftovers, wondering when I'd get a break. But then Camille would come home, exhausted but happy, and tell me about some test she'd crushed, and I'd think, worth it. The distance started creeping in slow, like rust on a car you don't notice until it's too late. She'd stay late at school, saying she was studying with friends. I'd call, and she'd sound distracted, rushed. "I'm fine, Mason, just busy," she'd say, and I'd let it go. Friends warned me, guys at the shop, my sister, even Sadie once. "She's changing, man," they'd say. "You sure she's still in this?" I'd brush them off. "She's stressed," I'd tell them. "Med school's hard. She needs me to keep it steady." I believed it because I had to. Love made me blind, I guess. I'd see her come home in new clothes, nice stuff I didn't buy, and she'd say it was a gift from a classmate. I'd nod, too tired to push, and keep working. Always working. One night stands out, maybe 2 years in. I'd been sick, fever, chills, the works, but I couldn't miss a shift. Rent was due, and her textbooks weren't cheap. I came home shaking, barely able to stand, and she was there, studying at the table. She looked up, worried, and said, "Mason, you're burning up. Go to bed." I shook my head, said I'd be fine, but she got up, made me soup, sat with me while I ate. She held my hand, her fingers soft against my rough skin, and said, "I couldn't do this without you." I fell asleep with her next to me, thinking we were solid. But looking back, that was one of the last times I felt close to her. After that, she started pulling away, longer nights out, shorter talks, excuses piling up. I told myself it was the pressure, that she'd come back to me when it was over. I was wrong. I snapped out of it, back in my truck, the memories fading into the dark. My hands were cold now, the keys digging into my palm. I'd given her everything, my time, my money, my heart, and she'd taken it all, then handed it to someone else. I thought about that condo I'd paid for, the one I'd never lived in because it was closer to campus. I'd stayed in this dump, with its thin walls and leaky roof, so she could have something better. I'd skipped meals, worked through pain, let my own life shrink down to nothing, all for her. And now she was standing there with Julian, saying I didn't fit her world. Like I was some dirty secret she'd outgrown. I climbed out of the truck, slamming the door hard enough to make the frame shake, and trudged up the stairs to my apartment. The place smelled like motor oil and stale coffee, the way it always did. I dropped onto the couch, staring at the ceiling, and felt the anger settle in deep. Not just at her, but at myself. I'd let this happen. I'd ignored the signs, the warnings, because I loved her too much to see the truth. But not anymore. I sat up, my jaw tight, and looked around at the life I'd let slip away. The pawned watch, the missed moments, the years I'd poured into her, they were gone. But I wasn't. I was still here, still breathing, still me. She could have her new world, her new husband. I'd find my own way back. Not for her, not for anyone else, just for me. And that was enough for now. I stood outside that swanky downtown venue, my hands stuffed in the pockets of a suit I'd never worn before, watching the lights spill out onto the street. It was Camille and Julian's engagement party. Yeah, they moved fast, and I wasn't supposed to be here. The invitation hadn't come my way, not that I expected it to. I'd heard about it from Sadie, who'd called me up, her voice tight with anger, saying, "She's acting like you never existed, Mason. It's not right." I didn't plan to show up, not at first. I'd spent the last few days after the graduation trying to keep my head down, fixing cars, loading boxes, driving strangers around, anything to keep my mind off her. But something in me wouldn't let it go. Not revenge, not exactly. I just needed them to know I wasn't invisible. So there I was, in a suit I'd bought years ago for a wedding we never had, holding an envelope that felt heavier than it should have. The place was packed, fancy cars lined up, people in dresses and ties laughing like money grew on trees. I could hear music drifting out, some soft jazz thing that didn't fit my world. My boots felt loud on the pavement as I walked up, the doorman eyeing me like I was lost. "Name?" he asked, flipping through a clipboard. "Mason Reed," I said, keeping my voice steady. He frowned, scanning the list, then shook his head. "You're not on here." I nodded, like I'd expected that, and said, "I won't be long. Just dropping something off." He hesitated, then shrugged and waved me in. I guess I didn't look like trouble. Not yet, anyway. Inside, it was all gold and glass, chandeliers sparkling overhead, waiters weaving through with trays of tiny food I couldn't name. I spotted Camille right away, glowing in a white dress that hugged her like it was made for her. Julian was next to her, his arm around her waist, talking to some older couple who looked like they owned half the city. His parents, probably. Her med school friends were there too, clinking glasses, and a couple of young guys with cameras, maybe media interns, snapping pictures. I stood by the wall for a minute, taking it in, feeling the weight of that envelope in my hand. It wasn't anger driving me now. It was something quieter, something I couldn't name. I just knew I had to do this. I started across the room, my steps slow but sure, and I saw Camille's head turn. Her eyes locked on mine, and her smile faltered, just for a second. She whispered something to Julian, who glanced my way, his face tightening. I didn't stop. People parted around me, their chatter fading as they noticed something was off. I reached the little stage where a mic stood, probably for speeches later, and I stepped up, tapping it once. The sound cut through the room, sharp and loud, and every head turned. Camille's face went pale, and Julian took a step forward, like he might stop me. Too late. I pulled the envelope out and held it up, my voice calm but firm. Evening, everyone. I'm Mason Reed. You don't know me, but I've got a story to tell. I opened the envelope and slid out the papers, bank statements, tuition receipts, a spreadsheet I'd spent hours putting together. 6 years ago, I said, looking out at the crowd, my wife, Camille, decided she wanted to be a doctor. I told her I'd make it happen. And I did. I held up the first sheet. This is every dollar I paid. $220,000 and change. Textbooks, rent, tuition. I worked 3 jobs, mechanic, warehouse loader, Uber driver. I pawned my granddad's watch, skipped meals, missed my mom's funeral, all so she could stand here tonight. The room was dead quiet now, just the hum of the mic and the rustle of paper. I glanced at Camille. She was frozen, her hands clenched, and kept going. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I loved her. But a few days ago, at her graduation, she introduced this guy. I nodded at Julian, as her husband. Said I was just a friend who helped out. So I figured you all deserve the truth. I flipped through the pages, letting them see the numbers, the dates, the proof. Every cent I made, I gave her. I lived in a one-room dump, so she could have a condo downtown. I worked through fevers, 16-hour days, because I believed in her dream. And now she's here, celebrating with you, and I'm not even a name on the list. I paused, letting it sink in, then looked straight at Camille. I may not be the man beside her today, but I'm the reason she ever made it here. That's all I came to say. I set the papers down on the podium, stepped off the stage, and started for the door. The silence broke, then gasps, whispers, a few claps I didn't expect. I didn't look back. I heard her voice as I reached the exit. Mason, wait. But I kept walking. Outside, the air hit me cold and sharp, and I sucked it in deep, my heart pounding. I'd done it. Not to hurt her, not to ruin her night, just to stand up for myself. My truck was parked a block away, and I was halfway there when Sadie caught up, her heels clacking on the sidewalk. Mason, that was insane, she said, breathless, her eyes wide. You okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. They're freaking out in there, she went on. Camille's panicking, Julian's pissed. You shook them up. I shrugged, kicking a pebble across the street. Didn't do it for them, I said. Did it for me. She grabbed my arm, stopping me. You didn't have to, you know. You could have let her have her lie. I looked at her, the streetlights catching her worried face, and shook my head. No, I couldn't. She doesn't get to erase me, Sadie. Not after everything. She nodded, slow, like she got it, and let go. What now? She asked. I didn't have an answer, not really. Go home, I guess, I said, turning toward my truck. Figure it out tomorrow. She watched me go, and I could feel her eyes on my back as I climbed in and started the engine. Driving away, the city lights blurred past, and I felt lighter than I had in days. Not happy, not yet, just unburdened. I'd laid it all out, every sacrifice, every dollar, and they couldn't unhear it. Camille's world might have cracked a little tonight, but mine didn't. I'd stood there, in my cheap suit and scuffed boots, and told the truth. Not her truth, not Julian's, mine. And as the road stretched out ahead, dark and quiet, I realized something. I didn't need their applause or her apology. I'd taken back what she tried to steal, my story, my worth. It wasn't much, not compared to their fancy party, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. I woke up the next morning with my head pounding, the kind of ache that comes from too little sleep and too much thinking. My apartment was quiet, the early light sneaking through the blinds, hitting the empty coffee mug on the table. I'd barely slept after the engagement party, just sat on the couch, staring at nothing, replaying what I'd done. Walking into that room, taking the mic, spilling 6 years of my life for strangers to hear, it felt like a dream, something I'd watched someone else do. But it was real. The envelope was gone, left on that podium, and so was the weight I'd been carrying. I didn't know what would happen next, but I'd lit a match, and now I could feel the heat. I dragged myself to the kitchen, brewed some coffee, and tried to shake the fog. My phone buzzed on the counter, Sadie again, probably checking in. I ignored it for now, needing a minute to breathe. The TV was on low, some morning news show, and I was halfway through my first sip when I heard it. Local man's speech at engagement party goes viral. My stomach dropped, and I turned up the volume, staring at the screen. There I was, grainy footage from someone's phone, standing on that stage with my papers in hand. I worked 3 jobs. I'm the reason she ever made it here. My voice crackled through the speakers. The anchor cut in, saying, Mason Reed's story of sacrifice has sparked a firestorm online, with thousands sharing his words. I sank onto the couch, the mug warm in my hands, watching my life spill out for the world to see. It didn't take long for things to spiral. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing texts, calls, voicemails from numbers I didn't know. Sadie finally got through, her voice fast and excited. Mason, you're everywhere. People are losing it over this. Camille's freaking out, she called me crying, saying it's a PR nightmare. I rubbed my face, trying to process it. What's she saying? I asked, my throat dry. Sadie hesitated, then said, she's trying to spin it. Told her friends you exaggerated, that it wasn't all you. But no one's buying it. Not after those receipts. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me, and muttered, good. I didn't want her tears or her excuses. I just wanted the truth to stick. The day got weirder from there. I went to the shop, figuring work would keep my head straight, but the guys were already on it. You're famous, Reed. My buddy Tony yelled, waving his phone. Look at this, unsung hero of med school. That's you, man. I shrugged it off, grabbing my tools, but inside, my chest tightened. I'd only meant to stand up for myself, not start some circus. Customers started asking about it too, guys dropping off cars, saying, heard you on the news, Mason. Hell of a story. I kept my answers short, focusing on oil changes and brake pads, but it followed me. By the time I clocked out, my voicemail was full, reporters, mostly, wanting interviews. I deleted them all. I wasn't here for their headlines. That night, Sadie showed up at my place, her eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in her before, pride, maybe. You need to see this, she said, shoving her phone at me. It was a post from one of Camille's med school friends, some guy named Derek. I lived with Camille and Mason for a month, it read. He's not lying. He worked himself to death for her. She's full of it. Sadie grinned. He's not the only one. People are talking, her classmates, old neighbors. They're backing you up. I scrolled through, seeing more tweets, comments, even a video from a girl who'd worked with Camille at the diner. Mason was the real deal, she said. Camille's acting like he didn't exist, but we all saw it. I handed the phone back, my jaw tight. Didn't expect this, I said. Sadie nodded. Neither did she. The next day, it got bigger. I was at the warehouse, hauling boxes, when my boss pulled me aside. You got a call, he said, handing me his phone. It was Dr. Simone Arnett, Camille's mentor, the one I'd seen at the graduation. Her voice was calm, professional. Mr. Reed, I owe you an apology. I didn't know the full story. What Camille did, it's disappointing. I stood there, sweat dripping down my back, not sure what to say. Oh, thanks, I managed. She kept going. I saw the papers you left. It's impressive, what you did. If you ever need legal advice, I know people. No charge. I mumbled something about appreciating it and hung up, my head spinning. Legal advice? I didn't want to fight. I just wanted peace. But peace wasn't coming easy. Camille's world was cracking, and I could feel it even from where I stood. Sadie told me later that Julian's parents were furious, something about their family name getting dragged through the mud. Her med school friends were whispering, pulling back, and her mentors were asking questions. I didn't care about ruining her, but I wasn't sorry either. She'd built her castle on my back, then kicked me out the gate. Now the walls were shaking, and she had no one to blame but herself. I kept waiting for the anger to hit me again, but it didn't. Instead, something strange started happening. People thanked me. It started small. A guy at the gas station clapped me on the shoulder, said, "Heard your story, man. Respect." Then a lady at the grocery store, older, with tired eyes, stopped me. "You remind me of my husband," she said. "He worked like that for me too. Don't let her take that from you." I nodded, awkward, not used to this. But it kept coming, notes left on my truck, messages online, even a kid at the shop who said, "You're like a superhero, mister." I didn't feel like one. I felt tired, raw, like I'd been scraped clean. But those words, they stuck. They built something in me I hadn't expected. By the end of the week, I was sitting on my couch again, the TV off, just listening to the quiet. My phone buzzed, another message, this time from a local reporter asking for a sit-down. I deleted it, same as the others. I didn't need their cameras. What I needed was to figure out what this meant for me, not her. I'd thrown my truth out there, and it had landed hard, but it wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up, being seen. And now people were seeing me, not just as Camille's shadow, but as Mason Reed, the guy who didn't quit. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and let that settle. The world could keep spinning, Camille could keep scrambling. I'd done my part. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe, like the air was mine again, not hers. And that was enough to keep me going. I was tightening a bolt on a rusty old Chevy at the shop when Tony slapped a newspaper on the workbench, grinning like he'd won something. "Check it out, Reed," he said, pointing at the headline, "The man who funded a doctor's dream, then got erased." My name was right there, in big black letters, next to a blurry picture of me from the engagement party, holding up those papers. I wiped my hands on a rag, my stomach doing a flip, and picked it up. Local mechanic Mason Reed's story of sacrifice has captured hearts. It started, and I skimmed the rest, words like inspiration and resilience jumping out at me. I tossed it back on the bench, shaking my head. "Didn't ask for this," I muttered. But Tony just laughed. "Too late, man. You're a hero now." I didn't feel like a hero. I felt exposed, like someone had ripped open my life and put it on display. The shop was busier than usual that day, guys dropping off cars, lingering to shake my hand, saying stuff like, "Heard about you, Mason. Hell of a thing you did." I nodded, kept my answers short, and focused on the work. Wrenches and oil I could handle. This spotlight stuff was new, and I wasn't sure I liked it. But it didn't stop. By lunch, my phone was buzzing again, Sadie this time, saying, "You see the article? It's gone viral, Mason. People love you." I grunted, chewing on a sandwich, and told her, "I just want to fix cars, not be some poster boy." She laughed, but I could hear the pride in her voice. "Too bad. You're stuck with it." The next day, it got real. I was at the community center near my place, dropping off some old tools for their shop class, when a guy in a suit came up to me. "Mason Reed?" he asked, sticking out his hand. "Name's Carl. I run a blue-collar heroes panel, heard of it?" I hadn't, but I shook his hand anyway, my grip firm from years of work. "We talk about guys like you," he said, "people who keep the world running." "That speech you gave? We'd love you to speak at our next event." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "I'm not a speaker," I said, shifting my weight. "I just said what I had to." He smiled, like he'd heard that before. "That's why we want you. It's real. Think about it." He handed me a card and walked off, leaving me standing there, the tools heavy in my hands. I thought about it all day, through my shift at the warehouse, through the Uber runs that night. Me, on a stage again, talking to a room full of strangers. It wasn't my thing. I liked quiet, the hum of an engine, the feel of a wrench turning. But something about Carl's words stuck. Guys like me, keeping the world running. I'd spent years running for Camille, and now people saw me for it. Not her, not Julie and me. I called him back that night, my voice steady. "I'll do it," I said. "But I'm not fancy. I'll just tell it like it is." He laughed. "That's perfect." The panel was a week later, at a big hall downtown. I showed up in my best jeans and a clean shirt. No suit this time felt more like me. The room was full, maybe 100 people, all working types, truckers, builders, factory guys. I sat on a folding chair, listening to the others talk, stories of long hours, family struggles, quiet wins. Then it was my turn. I stepped up, the mic heavy in my hand, and looked out at them. "I'm Mason," I said, my voice rough but clear. I'm a mechanic. Worked 3 jobs for 6 years so my wife could be a doctor. She made it, then told everyone I was just a friend. I showed up at her engagement party with the receipts, $220,000 worth. Not to hurt her, but to say I was there. I paused, the room dead quiet. I'm not special. Just a guy who did what he had to. If that's a hero, then we all are. They clapped, loud, real claps, not the polite kind from Camille's crowd. A few guys stood, nodding, and I felt my face heat up. I sat down quick, my heart pounding, but it wasn't bad. It was good. After, people came up, shook my hand, told me their own stories. One guy, older, with a limp, said, I worked doubles for my kid's school. Wife left too. You're not alone, son. I nodded, throat tight, and realized he was right. I wasn't alone. This was bigger than me now. Things kept moving after that. My side hustle, fixing cars out of my garage, picked up. Local guys started calling, saying, heard you're the real deal, Mason. Can you look at my truck? Then a couple of them, small business owners, showed up with an offer. We'll back you, they said. Get a real shop going. You've got something people trust. I didn't say yes right away, money's tight, and I'm careful, but I didn't say no either. It was a chance, one I hadn't seen coming. Then, out of nowhere, a doctor from the clinic where Camille used to intern called. Saw your story, he said. I'm building a program, health care for working families. Need a consultant who gets it. You in? I laughed, surprised. I'm no doctor, I said. He chuckled. Don't need to be. You know the grind. That's enough. I took the gig part-time. Nothing big, but it paid. I'd sit with him, talk about what guys like me need, cheap checkups, late hours, no fancy nonsense. It felt good, useful. My name was starting to mean something, not because of her, but because of me. People stopped me on the street now, cops, welders, moms with tired eyes, all saying, keep going, Mason. I didn't know what that meant yet, but I nodded, kept moving. The shop idea grew too. Those investors pushed, and I started sketching plans on napkins, late at night when the world was quiet. One evening, I was at the community center again, tinkering with an old engine for the kids' class, when Sadie showed up. You're different, she said, leaning on the workbench. Calmer, stronger. I shrugged, wiping grease off my hands. Maybe, I said, just figuring it out. She smiled soft. They're calling you a blue-collar legend online. Camille hates it. I snorted, shaking my head. Let her hate it. I'm not doing this for her. Sadie nodded, and we stood there, the engine humming between us. I didn't need Camille's stage anymore. I had my own, small, rough, real. The spotlight had turned, and I wasn't running from it. I was standing in it, on my terms, and it felt like mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't just the guy behind someone else. I was Mason Reed, and that was enough. I was elbow deep in a transmission at the shop when my phone buzzed in my pocket, the third time that morning. I wiped my hands on a rag, figuring it was Sadie or maybe another reporter who wouldn't quit, and pulled it out. It was a text from an unknown number. Mason, it's Camille. We need to talk. Please. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen, feeling that old ache creep up my chest. I hadn't heard from her since the engagement party, not directly, just whispers through Sadie about her scrambling to save face. Part of me wanted to delete it, let her stew in whatever mess she'd made. But another part, the part that still remembered her asleep in my arms, wouldn't let me. I typed back, slow and careful. What's there to say? She replied fast. I never thought you'd actually leave. I set the phone down, my jaw tight, and went back to the car. I didn't know her an answer. Not anymore. The next few days, I kept busy, shop work, warehouse shifts, meetings with the doctor about that clinic program. But her message stuck with me, nagging like a loose bolt I couldn't tighten. I didn't want to care, but I did. Then Sadie called, her voice low. Mason, it's getting rough for her. She's up for some big fellowship, and the hospital board's digging into your story. Julian's backing off too. His family's pissed about the publicity. I leaned against my truck, the sun hot on my neck, and sighed. Not my problem, I said, but it didn't feel true. I'd started this, whether I meant to or not. She's texting me, I admitted. Sadie went quiet, then said, what did she say? I told her, and she snorted. She's scared, Mason. She's losing everything she built, and now she's looking back. Don't let her pull you in. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I won't, I said and hung up. A week later, I got a call from a lawyer, some guy named Harris, voice smooth like he charged by the hour. "Mr. Reed," he said, "I've been following your situation. You've got a case for spousal repayment, 6 years of support, documented. Could be a big payout." I was in my kitchen, stirring instant coffee, and I stopped cold. "A case," I said. "Like sewer." He went on, all business, legal terms, percentages, how I'd invested in her career. I cut him off. "I didn't do it for money. I did it for her." Harris paused, then said, "Fair enough. But she's reaping the rewards, and you're not. Think it over." He left his number, and I sat there, the coffee going cold, staring at the wall. Sue her? Drag her through court? Make her pay me back? It didn't sit right. She'd taken enough from me. I didn't want her debt too. Meanwhile, the world kept turning. My shop was picking up. Those investors pushed me to sign a lease on a bigger space, and I was fixing more cars than I could count. The clinic gig was steady too, real work, helping guys like me get checkups without breaking the bank. People still stopped me, said my story kept them going, and I'd nod, awkward but grateful. But Camille's reckoning was happening, and I couldn't ignore it. Sadie told me the hospital board called her in, a review meeting for that fellowship. She had to explain it all, Sadie said over the phone. Your speech, the receipts, how she played it off. They're not happy. I pictured her in some sterile room, facing suits with stern faces, and felt a twinge, not pity, not quite, but something close. She'll figure it out, I said. She's smart. Sadie huffed. Smart doesn't fix this. I heard later, through the grapevine, that Julian was gone. His parents pulled him back, didn't want their name tied to her mess. Sponsors dropped her too. Some big grant she'd been chasing fell through. I didn't cheer, didn't gloat. It wasn't my win to celebrate. I'd said my piece, and the fallout was hers to carry. But that text kept gnawing at me. I never thought you'd actually leave. Like she'd expected me to stay quiet and loyal while she built her new life. I didn't reply, didn't plan to. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. Still, it lingered, a loose thread I couldn't cut. One night, I was at the community center, tinkering with an old bike for the kids' class, when Sadie showed up. She's not getting the fellowship, she said, leaning on the workbench. Board's holding off, reputation concerns, they called it. I kept my eyes on the chain, adjusting it slow. She'll bounce back, I said, my voice flat. Sadie crossed her arms. Maybe, but she's alone now. Julian's out, her friends are quiet. She's feeling it. I nodded, not sure what to say. You think she deserves it? Sadie asked, her tone sharp. I set the wrench down, wiping my hands. I don't know, I said. Not my call. She'll have to carry her debt differently, not in cash, but in her head. That's worse. Sadie watched me, her eyes searching. You're not mad anymore, she said, more statement than question. I shrugged. Mad doesn't fix it. I said what I needed to. Rest is on her. She nodded, slow, and we sat there, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. I didn't hate Camille not anymore. I'd loved her once, poured everything into her, and she'd thrown it away. But that was her burden now, not mine. I'd walked away, not to destroy her, but to save myself. And I had. The lawyer called again a few days later, pushing the case. Last chance, Mason, he said. She's vulnerable now, perfect time to strike. I cut him off. No, I said, firm. I'm done fighting her. Let her live with it. He sighed, like I was a fool, and hung up. I didn't care. Money wouldn't give me back those years, wouldn't erase her words. I'd rather build something new than claw at her ruins. The shop lease was signed that week, my name on the door, Reed's Auto, in bold letters. The clinic program grew too, more families coming in, thanking me for keeping it real. I was moving forward, not looking back. That night, I sat on my couch, the TV off, just listening to the quiet. Camille's text glowed in my mind, but I didn't touch my phone. She'd never thought I'd leave because she'd never seen me, really seen me. I'd been her rock, her bank, her shadow, and she'd assumed I'd stay that way. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I was Mason Reed, mechanic, consultant, the guy who'd stood up and walked away. She'd face her reckoning, alone or not, and I'd face mine, building a life that was mine, not hers. I leaned back, closing my eyes, and let it go. The past was hers to carry. The future? That was mine. And it felt solid, like something I could hold on to, something real. I stood on the stage at the grand opening of Forge, my hands shoved in my pockets, the crowd buzzing below me like a hive I'd stirred up. It was a year since that night in the parking garage, A year since Camille tore my world apart, and here I was, 36, still a mechanic, but something more now. The building behind me was brick and steel, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Forge wasn't just a repair shop, it was a mentorship center, a place for young guys like I'd been to learn a trade, fix a car, build a life. The sign above the door read, Forge, strength through work, and I'd picked every word myself. Local entrepreneurs flanked me, guys who'd invested after my story went viral, along with Sadie, who'd taken on the community coordinator role. I looked out at the faces, kids, parents, neighbors, and felt my chest tighten, not with nerves, but with something I hadn't felt in years, pride. The mic was in my hand, and I cleared my throat, the sound sharp over the speakers. "I'm Mason Reed," I said, my voice steady, rough from a long day. A year ago, I was working 3 jobs, trying to hold up someone else's dream. It didn't work out, but I didn't stop. This place, Forge, it's for guys who don't stop either. You don't need a degree to make something of yourself. You need grit, hands that work, and a chance. That's what we're here for. The crowd clapped, loud and real, and I stepped back, letting Sadie take over with the details, classes, schedules, all the stuff she was better at. I watched her, her dark hair bouncing as she talked, and thought about how she'd stuck by me when no one else did. She'd seen the truth back then, and now she was here, building this with me. The day was a blur after that, ribbon cutting, handshakes, kids running around the shop, touching tools like they were toys. I showed a group of them how to change a tire, my hands moving slow so they could follow, and their eyes lit up like I'd handed them gold. One kid, maybe 16, skinny with a chipped tooth, said, "You're the guy from the video, right? The one who didn't quit." I nodded, wiping grease off my fingers. "Yeah, that's me." He grinned. "Cool." I didn't feel cool, I felt tired, worn, but his words stuck. People still talked about that speech, the receipts, the way I'd walked out of Camille's life. Online, it was a legend now, but to me, it was just the day I stopped being her shadow. Later, I was in the back office, sorting through some paperwork, when Sadie came in with a letter. "Mail for you," she said, tossing it on the desk. The handwriting was familiar, Camille's, and my stomach flipped. I hadn't heard from her since that text months ago, the one I never answered. I picked it up, the paper thin in my hands, and hesitated. "You gonna read it?" Sadie asked, leaning on the doorframe. I shrugged. "Maybe." She rolled her eyes but didn't push, leaving me alone with it. I tore it open, my pulse loud in my ears, and started reading. It was long, messy, her words spilling over the page like she'd written it in a rush. "Mason," it began, "I've been trying to find the right way to say this. I'm sorry, not just for what I did, but for who I became. I lost myself in that world, and I lost you. I see it now. Everything you gave me, everything I took. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope you're proud of who you are." I set it down, my hands steady, and stared at the wall. Proud of who I was. I thought about that, about the years I'd spent breaking myself for her, the nights I'd come home to nothing, the way she'd erased me. And then I thought about now, the shop humming outside, the kids learning, the life I'd built from the wreckage. Yeah, I was proud. Not because of her apology, but because I'd made it here without her. I folded the letter, slid it into a drawer, and didn't write back. She didn't ask me to. She didn't ask for anything, just left it there, like a weight she needed to drop. I let her have that. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. The rest of the day went smooth, more tours, more thanks from parents who said, "This is what my boy needs." One guy, a welder with rough hands like mine, pulled me aside. "Heard your story," he said. "Built something like this myself once. Keep it up." I nodded, grateful, and watched him go. The investors were happy too, talking expansion already, maybe a second location. I didn't say much, just listened, letting it sink in. This wasn't just a fluke. It was real, growing, mine. Sadie caught me later, grinning. "You're a natural at this," she said. "Bossing people around, teaching kids." I snorted. "Hardly. Just doing what I know." She shook her head. "It's more than that. You're giving them what you didn't have." That night, after everyone left, I locked up and stood in the empty shop, the smell of oil and metal thick in the air. The tools were lined up, the floor swept, everything in its place. I ran my hand over a workbench, feeling the dents and scratches, and thought about Camille's letter. She'd seen it, my strength, my worth, but too late. I didn't need her to tell me now. I saw it myself, and the kids who'd hung on my every word, in the space I'd carved out. I'd spent years chasing her dream, thinking it was ours, but this was mine. No degrees, no fancy suits, just me and what I could do with my hands. I drove home under a dark sky, the truck rumbling steady, and felt the quiet settle in. Not the heavy kind I'd known before, but a good kind, a full kind. The next day, I'd be back at Forge, teaching, fixing, building. Sadie would be there, keeping it all together, and the kids would show up, eager and loud. It wasn't perfect, money was tight, hours were long, but it was enough. More than enough. I pulled into my lot, cut the engine, and sat there, the letter flickering in my mind. I hope you're proud, she'd written. I was. Not for her, not because of her, but for me. I'd forged something out of nothing, and it stood strong. I climbed out, the night cool against my skin, and headed inside. The apartment was still small, still rough, but it didn't feel empty anymore. I kicked off my boots, dropped onto the couch, and closed my eyes. Tomorrow was another day, another chance to keep going, to show those kids what I'd learned the hard way. You don't need someone else's stage to shine. I'd found mine, built it from the ground up, and it was solid. That was my win, quiet and real, and no one could take it from me. Not her, not anyone. I was Mason Reed, and I was proud. I stood by the lake at sunset, the water flat and golden, watching a handful of Forge apprentices wrestle with an old boat engine I dragged out here for them to practice on. The air smelled like damp earth and gasoline, a mix that felt right to me, and their voices carried over the quiet, laughs, curses, the clank of tools. I leaned against my truck, arms crossed, letting the breeze cool the sweat on my neck. It had been a long day, teaching a morning class at Forge, fixing a busted radiator at the shop, then hauling this engine out here for the kids. But I wasn't tired, not the way I used to be. This was different. This was peace, the kind that settles deep, not from noise or crowds, but from knowing I was where I belonged. The kids were a mess, grease on their shirts, arguing over a wrench like it was a prize, but they were getting it. One of them, Jake, the skinny 16-year-old with the chipped tooth, looked up and grinned. "Think we got it, Mason," he yelled, cranking the starter. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life, a rough growl that made them all cheer. I nodded, a small smile tugging at my mouth. "Not bad," I called back. "Now take it apart and do it again." They groaned, but they were laughing too, already reaching for the tools. I watched them, my chest full, and thought about how far I'd come. A year ago, I was a ghost in my own life, chasing Camille's dream. Now, I was here, teaching these kids to build their own. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky red, and I took a deep breath, letting it fill me up. This spot by the lake was mine, a place I'd found after everything fell apart, where I'd come to think, to let go. I'd spend hours here over the months, staring at the water, piecing myself back together. I thought about Camille a lot in those early days, her voice, her laugh, the way she looked at me once, like I was her whole world. I'd loved her, hard and deep, and I'd pictured a life with her kids, a house, maybe a dog tearing up the yard. That dream was gone now, scattered like leaves on the wind, but standing here, I didn't miss it. Not anymore. I'd let it go, not with anger, but with a quiet nod to what was. I kicked a rock into the water, watching the ripples spread, and my mind drifted to her letter. It had been weeks since the Forge opening, since I'd read her words, "I hope you're proud," and tucked them away. I hadn't written back, hadn't called. She didn't need me to. She'd said her piece, and I'd taken mine. Sadie told me later that Camille was still in the city, working at a smaller hospital, no fellowship, no Julian. "She's quieter now," Sadie had said, her voice soft. "Like she's figuring it out." I'd nodded, not asking more. Camille's life was hers to live, her mistakes hers to carry. I didn't wish her ill. I never had, but I didn't any. Mine was enough. The kids finished up, the engine in pieces again, and Jake jogged over, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You coming tomorrow?" he asked, eyes bright. "We're doing breaks next, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'll be there. Don't be late. You're leading it." His grin widened, and he ran back to the group, yelling something about being the boss. I chuckled, shaking my head. Forge was growing. More kids signing up, more donors pitching in. The shop was steady too, Reed's Auto, a name people trusted. The clinic program kept me busy, helping families like mine had been, working folks who just needed a break. It wasn't big or loud, but it was real, and it fit me like my old boots, worn but solid. I thought about the years I'd given Camille, 6 long ones, every day a grind for her dream. I'd been the man behind the degree, the one who'd carried her to that stage. But now, standing here, I was the man behind my own name. I didn't need her validation, didn't need her to clap for me. The kids' cheers, the hum of a fixed engine, the way Sadie smiled when we locked up Forge, that was my applause. I'd built this life from the ground up, not with fancy words or a sharp suit, but with my hands, my sweat, my stubborn refusal to quit. And it was mine, every dent and scratch of it. The sky darkened, the last light fading, and I called the kids over. "Pack it up," I said, my voice carrying. "Time to head out." They grumbled but got to it, hauling the tools into the truck bed. I helped, lifting the engine with Jake, our shoulders brushing as we worked. "You're good at this," I told him, setting it down. He shrugged, "Shy now. Learned from you." I clapped his back, not saying more. That was enough. We piled into the truck, the kids squeezed in the back, laughing and shoving, and I drove them home, the road dark and familiar. Dropping them off, I watched them scatter, Jake waving, the others yelling goodbyes, and felt that peace again, steady and warm. Back at my place, I parked and climbed the stairs, the night quiet around me. The apartment was the same, small, rough, smelling like oil, but it felt different now. Full somehow. I kicked off my boots, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and dropped onto the couch. The lake lingered in my mind. The water, the kids, the engine's roar. I thought about Camille one last time, not with pain, but with a kind of distance, like looking at an old photo you don't need to keep. She'd been my world once, and I'd given her everything. But she'd taken it and walked away, and I'd found something better. Not her stage, not her spotlight, mine. I took a sip, the cold biting my throat, and leaned back, closing my eyes. Tomorrow, I'd be up early, Forge, the shop, the clinic. More kids to teach, more cars to fix, more people to help. It wasn't glamorous, wasn't loud, but it was real. I didn't need headlines or crowds. I had this. The lake, the work, the quiet win of knowing who I was. Mason Reed, not the man behind her degree, but the man behind his own name. I'd fought for it, built it, earned it. And as the night settled in, I let the past slip away, final and gone. The future was here, in my hands, and it was enough. More than enough. It was mine. After 5 years of hard work, my wife's father, the boss, gave the promotion to his nephew, who'd been there 3 months. I submitted my resignation with a smile. "Congrats to Jack," I said. When my wife's dad read my letter, he freaked out. "Is this a joke?" He started yelling when. "My name is Marcus Hayes, and I'm 44 years old, standing in this sterile conference room that smells like burnt coffee and disappointment, clapping my hands together like some trained seal while my whole damn world crumbles around me. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting that sickly yellow glow that makes everyone look like they're dying. And maybe that's fitting because something inside me sure as hell is. Jack Monroe, my wife's cousin, this 26-year-old kid who still asks me how to work the copy machine, just got announced as our new regional director. 3 months. The bastard's been here exactly 3 months, and now he's got the corner office with the view of downtown, while I'm still crammed into that shoebox next to the supply closet. 5 years I've been busting my ass for this company, building their logistics network from the ground up, staying late, coming in on weekends, missing Sophia's soccer games because the shipment from Phoenix needs to be tracked personally. Charles Alden, my father-in-law, stands at the head of that polished conference table like he's announcing the second coming instead of promoting his nephew over the guy who actually knows what the hell he's doing. His silver hair is perfectly styled. His suit probably costs more than I make in a month. And that smile. God, that smile makes me want to punch something. Jack brings fresh energy to our team. He's saying, his voice all smooth and practiced like he's giving a speech at the country club. New perspectives, innovative thinking, the kind of forward momentum that'll take Alden Ventures to the next level. Fresh energy. Right. The kid can barely manage his email without calling me over to explain why his computer is acting weird, when really he just forgot his password again. But there he sits, grinning like he won the lottery, probably already planning how he's going to redecorate my office. Excuse me, his office now. The one I helped design when we expanded last year. The one where I spent countless hours developing the supply chain protocols that made this company profitable. I'm still clapping, my palms starting to sting, and I catch sight of Janet from accounting giving me this look. Half pity, half, I told you so. She's been warning me for months that something like this was coming, but I kept thinking Charles would do the right thing. Family or not, merit matters, right? Apparently, I was wrong. Dead wrong. The thing that really gets me is how they're all looking at me, waiting to see if I'm going to crack, if I'm going to make a scene. My coworkers, people I've worked alongside for years, they know this is bullshit. They know I should be sitting where Jack is, but they're all scared for their own jobs, so they keep clapping and nodding like puppets on strings. Can't blame them, really. We've all got mortgages to pay. I know you'll all give Jack the same support you've given me over the years, Charles continues, and I swear to God, the irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Support? I've been carrying this company's logistics department single-handedly while he plays golf with clients and takes 3-hour lunches. But sure, let's talk about support. Jack stands up, skinny kid, nervous energy, probably still shopping in the boys section, and clears his throat. Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to work with such a talented team. His voice cracks a little on talented, and I almost feel sorry for him. Almost. Then I remember that he's about to be making twice what I make while I train him how to do the job I should have gotten. The meeting's winding down now, people starting to file out, murmuring their congratulations and making plans for lunch. I should leave. I should walk out of here and go back to my desk and pretend like this is normal, like this is just how business works. But my feet feel like they're glued to the industrial carpet, and there's this pressure in my chest like someone's sitting on my ribcage. Charles is shaking hands with Jack, probably giving him some wise grandfather advice about leadership and responsibility. And I want to laugh because the only thing Jack's going to be leading is this company straight into the ground. But I don't laugh. Instead, I walk over to them, extend my hand to Jack, and say the words that taste like sawdust in my mouth. Congratulations, Jack. Really well deserved. The lie comes out smooth as silk, and Jack pumps my hand like we're old friends, his palms sweaty and uncertain. Thanks, Marcus. I'm really going to need your help getting up to speed. Of course he is. Of course I'm going to be the one training my own replacement, showing him the ropes, explaining how everything works while he gets the title and the salary and the respect that should have been mine. Absolutely. I hear myself saying, still wearing that fake smile that's starting to make my face hurt. Whatever you need. Charles beams at this little exchange, probably thinking he's handled this transition beautifully, that he's managed to keep everyone happy. He has no idea that something fundamental just shifted in this room, that the loyal son-in-law he's been taking for granted just realized exactly where he stands in the pecking order. As I finally make it back to my desk, my hands are shaking slightly, and I can't tell if it's from anger or something else entirely. Maybe it's relief. Maybe it's the first time in 5 years I'm seeing this place clearly, without the rose-colored glasses of hoping things would eventually work out fairly. The fluorescent light above my desk flickers and buzzes, just like always, but somehow it sounds different now, like a warning bell, or maybe like time running out. I sit down in my chair, stare at my computer screen, and for the first time since I started working here, I know with absolute certainty that I'm done. You know what's funny about betrayal? It doesn't happen all at once like in the movies. It's not some dramatic moment where the villain twirls his mustache and reveals his master plan. No, it creeps up on you like carbon monoxide, odorless, colorless, and by the time you realize what's happening, you're already half dead. 6 months ago, I was sitting in my cubicle working on the quarterly logistics report when Charles strolled over with his coffee mug, the one that says, "World's Greatest Grandpa," that Sophia gave him last Christmas. Back then, I still thought family meant something to him beyond just blood relations and tax benefits. "Hey, Marcus," he said, settling that fake casual tone he uses when he's about to drop something on you. "I wanted to run something by you. My nephew Jack, Brielle's cousin, you remember him from the wedding. He's finishing up his MBA at Wharton. Bright kid, really sharp. I'm thinking about bringing him in for a summer internship. Maybe let him see how the business world works." An internship. That's what he called it. I should have known right then that Charles Alden doesn't do anything small, doesn't make casual decisions about family members. But I was focused on the Morrison account that was going sideways, trying to figure out why our shipping costs had spiked 30% in 2 weeks, so I just nodded and said something like, "Sure, sounds good. Always happy to help out family." Family. Christ, I actually used that word with a straight face. 3 weeks later, Jack Monroe walked through our front doors wearing a suit that probably cost more than my car payment, carrying a leather briefcase that still had the price tag tucked inside the handle. I watched him from my desk as Charles gave him the grand tour, introducing him to everyone like he was visiting royalty instead of some college kid who'd never worked a real day in his life. But here's the thing that should have set off every alarm bell in my head. Charles didn't just stick Jack in some corner with a stack of filing or make him fetch coffee like every other intern in the history of corporate America. No, Jack got an office. Not a big one, but an office with a door and a window, and his name on a little placard that read Jack Monroe, management trainee. Management trainee. Not intern. Not summer help. Management fucking trainee. And where was this office located? Right next to Charles's corner suite. Close enough that they could chat through their open doors about golf handicaps and stock portfolios while the rest of us worker bees buzzed around trying to keep the company running. I trained him because that's what you do when you're a professional, when you still believe in doing the right thing even when your gut is screaming that something's off. Jack was eager enough. I'll give him that. He asked a million questions, took notes on everything, stayed late sometimes trying to understand how our vendor relationships worked. Part of me even liked the kid. He reminded me of myself when I first started, all ambition and energy, and hope that hard work actually meant something. But I started noticing things. Little things at first, like how Charles would call Jack into closed-door meetings that could have been emails. How Jack suddenly knew details about upcoming contracts that I hadn't been briefed on yet. How he'd casually mention conversations with department heads that happened when I wasn't around. The real wake-up call came about 2 months into Jack's internship. I was working late, trying to sort out a mess with our Phoenix distributor, when I heard voices coming from Charles's office. The door was cracked open just enough that I could see them sitting across from each other. Charles behind his massive oak desk, and Jack in one of those expensive leather chairs that probably cost more than most people make in a week. Marcus is dependable, Charles was saying, his voice carrying that tone he uses when he's explaining something to a child. He knows the systems inside and out, understands our clients, keeps everything running smooth. But Marcus doesn't have the credentials, doesn't have the vision for where this company needs to go. He's blue-collar smart, not boardroom smart. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I kept listening. You've got the degree, Jack. MBA from Wharton. That opens doors that Marcus's experience never will. And more importantly, your family. This company's been in the Alden name for 3 generations. I need someone I can trust completely, someone who understands that loyalty goes both ways. Jack's voice was quieter, harder to hear, but I caught enough. What about Marcus? He's family too, isn't he? Married to Brielle and all. Charles laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl. Marriage is just paperwork, son. Blood is forever. Marcus is useful, don't get me wrong. He'll make an excellent number 2, perfect for handling the day-to-day operations while you focus on strategy and growth. Number 2. After 5 years of building this place from the ground up, after missing family dinners and weekend barbecues in my daughter's school plays, I was going to be the number 2 to a kid who didn't know the difference between a bill of lading and a packing slip. That's when it all clicked into place, like puzzle pieces falling into a picture I didn't want to see. This wasn't about Jack learning the business or getting some real-world experience before heading off to his daddy's law firm or whatever. This was about Charles grooming his replacement, and I was just the hired help who'd been stupid enough to think that marrying into the family meant I was actually part of it. I crept back to my desk, grabbed my jacket, and drove home in silence while my brain tried to process what I'd just heard. Brielle was already asleep when I got there, and I sat in my kitchen drinking a beer and staring at the photos on our refrigerator. Sophia at her last soccer game, the 3 of us at Disney World 2 summers ago, Charles and his wife at our wedding, all smiles and promises about family sticking together. I wasn't being overlooked for the promotion I deserved. I was being used, plain and simple. Kept around just long enough to train my replacement and make sure the transition went smoothly. And the worst part? I'd been grateful for the opportunity. Brielle always had this way of cutting through my bullshit with surgical precision, like she could see right through all the excuses and rationalizations I'd built up over the years. We'd been married for 18 years, and in that time, she'd watched me take hits that would have sent most guys straight to HR or out the door looking for a new job. But not me. Never me. You let people walk over you, Marcus, she'd said about 6 months ago, standing in our kitchen with that look she gets when she's trying to decide whether to hug me or shake some sense into me. We'd just gotten back from one of Charles's dinner parties. You know, the kind where he invites all the department heads and their spouses over to his mansion so we can pretend we're all one big happy family, while he reminds everyone exactly who signs the paychecks. That particular night, Charles had spent 20 minutes telling everyone about Jack's brilliant insights during his first week, how the kid was already identifying inefficiencies that us old-timers had missed. I'd sat there nodding and smiling like a good little employee while my wife watched me swallow my pride with my overpriced steak. I don't let people walk over me, I told her, loading the dishwasher with more force than necessary. I'm being professional. There's a difference. She'd given me that look, the one that said she loved me but thought I was being an idiot. Professional is one thing, honey. Being a doormat is something else entirely. When was the last time you stood up for yourself at that place? Really stood up, not just complained about it to me later. I couldn't answer her then because she was right, and we both knew it. I'd built a career out of keeping my head down, doing the work, believing that eventually someone would notice and reward all that quiet dedication. But quiet dedication doesn't get you promoted when the boss's nephew needs a job, does it? Now here I am, 3 days after watching Jack get handed my future on a silver platter, lying in bed at 2 in the morning staring at the ceiling fan that's been making that weird clicking noise for 6 months, but I keep forgetting to fix. Brielle's asleep next to me, breathing soft and steady, and I'm thinking about what she said. About being a doormat. About standing up for myself. The worst part is thinking about Sophia. My daughter's 16 now, all legs and attitude and dreams about becoming a marine biologist, because she wants to save the ocean or some equally impossible and beautiful thing that only teenagers can believe in completely. She looks at me like I'm Superman, like I've got all the answers and the world makes sense because Dad's got everything under control. What kind of example am I setting for her? What am I teaching my daughter about self-respect and standing up for what's right when I can't even stand up for myself in my own workplace? She's been asking me about college lately, talking about applications and scholarships, and I keep telling her the same thing I've been saying since she was old enough to understand. Work hard, be honest, treat people right, and good things will happen. But that's a lie, isn't it? I've been working hard for 5 years, been honest to a fault, treated everyone with respect, and what did it get me? A front row seat to watching some kid who doesn't know jack shit about logistics get handed the job I've been earning one day at a time. How can I look Sophia in the eye and keep feeding her that line about hard work paying off when I'm living proof that sometimes it doesn't matter how hard you work or how good you are at your job? Sometimes what matters is whose DNA you share and whether you went to the right school with the right people. But here's the thing that's really eating at me. I'm not just angry about the promotion anymore. I'm angry at myself for being surprised, for being naive enough to think that family meant I was safe, that loyalty was a two-way street in the Alden household. I'm angry that I've spent so many years making excuses for Charles's behavior, telling myself he was just a demanding boss, when really he was just an asshole with a trust fund. And I'm scared. Scared of what happens next, scared of walking away from the only job I've had since college, scared of starting over at 44 with a mortgage and a kid who's counting on me to pay for her education. It's easy to talk tough when you're young and stupid and don't have anything to lose. It's a lot harder when you've got responsibilities and people depending on you. But you know what scares me more than starting over? The idea of staying put, of spending the next 20 years training other people's kids to be my boss, of watching Sophia grow up thinking her dad's okay with being treated like garbage as long as the paycheck clears. Brielle shifts next to me, making that little sound she makes when she's dreaming, and I think about waking her up, telling her what I'm thinking about doing. But I already know what she'd say. She'd tell me she's proud of me for finally growing a backbone. She'd probably say she's been waiting years for me to get mad enough to do something about it. The ceiling fan keeps clicking, and somewhere in the distance, I can hear a train whistle, probably the freight line that runs behind the industrial park where our warehouse is located. I've heard that sound 1,000 times driving to work, but tonight it sounds different. Tonight it sounds like it's calling me somewhere else, somewhere better. I reach over to my nightstand and grab my phone, opening up my Notes app. My fingers hover over the keyboard for a second, and then I start typing. Dear Charles, please accept this letter as my formal resignation from Alden Ventures, effective 2 weeks from today's date. My mistake to make, right? Well, maybe it's time I started making some mistakes that actually matter. Friday morning came like a reckoning, gray and cold with that kind of drizzle that makes everything look depressing as hell. I'd been carrying that resignation letter in my jacket pocket for 3 days, folded up neat and clean in a white envelope with Charles's name written across the front in my best handwriting. Every time I reached for it, every time I thought about walking into his office and ending this charade once and for all, I'd chicken out and tell myself I needed more time to think it through. But Thursday night changed everything. I'd gotten home from another soul-crushing day of watching Jack fumble through basic spreadsheets while everyone praised his fresh perspective, and Sophia was at the kitchen table doing her homework. She looked up when I walked in, and I swear to God, I saw something in her eyes that made my chest tight. Pity. My own daughter was looking at me with pity. "Dad," she'd said, closing her chemistry textbook, "are you okay? You seem really tired lately." Tired? Jesus, I wasn't tired. I was dying inside, one small humiliation at a time, and my 16-year-old daughter could see it written all over my face. That's when I knew I couldn't wait another day, couldn't spend another weekend rehearsing speeches in my head or making excuses about why Monday would be better. So here I am, standing outside Charles's office at 9:47 a.m., listening to him talk on the phone about his golf game last weekend while I work up the courage to knock. Through the glass, I can see him leaning back in that leather chair that probably costs more than most people's cars, feet up on his desk, laughing at something whoever he's talking to just said. This is the man who's been playing puppet master with my life, treating me like some kind of employee he can move around the board however he sees fit. I knock 3 times, sharp and professional, and he waves me in without even looking up from his conversation. "Hold on, Jim," he says into the phone, then covers the mouthpiece with his hand. "What's up, Marcus? Make it quick. I've got the mayor on the line." The mayor? Of course he does. Charles Alden doesn't just run a logistics company. He runs half the city council and probably has the fire chief's direct number saved in his contacts. That's the world I've been trying to belong to for 5 years. The world where connections matter more than competence and family names open doors that merit can't even find. "I need to give you something," I say, pulling the envelope from my jacket pocket. It feels heavier than paper should, weighted down with all the words I've been too scared to say out loud. "What's this?" he asks, still holding the phone, and I can hear Jim, whoever he is, asking if everything's all right on the other end. Charles sets the phone down without hanging up and takes the envelope, turning it over in his hands like he's never seen one before. When he opens it and starts reading, I watch his face go through this whole transformation. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something that looks almost like panic before settling into anger. "Is this a joke?" he shouts, loud enough that I'm pretty sure half the office can hear him through the glass walls. The phone is still off the hook, and I can hear Jim's tinny voice asking what's going on, but Charles ignores him completely. "You're quitting because Jack got promoted?" There it is, the question that reduces 5 years of dedication and expertise down to petty jealousy. Like I'm some kind of spoiled child throwing a tantrum because someone else got the toy I wanted. But I'm not going to let him frame this his way, not this time. "I've made my decision, Charles," I say, keeping my voice level and professional even though my heart's hammering against my ribs. 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. He stands up so fast his chair spins backward and hits the credenza behind his desk, sending his golf trophies rattling. 2 weeks. Are you out of your goddamn mind? Do you have any idea what this will do to operations? We've got the Morrison contract renewal next month, the Phoenix expansion project, the quarterly review with corporate. "I'm sure Jack can handle it," I interrupt, and the look on his face is almost worth the 5 years of frustration I've been swallowing. After all, he's got that MBA from Wharton. Fresh perspective, innovative thinking, all that. Charles's face is getting redder by the second, and I can see that vein in his forehead starting to bulge the way it does when suppliers are late with deliveries. "What about Brielle? What about Sophia? You're walking away from your family." And there it is, the guilt trip I've been expecting, the emotional manipulation disguised as concern. He's going to make this about family loyalty, about responsibility, about everything except the fact that he chose his nephew over his son-in-law and expected me to smile and take it. "No, Charles," I say, and for the first time in 5 years, I'm smiling at him without having to force it. "I'm walking away from you." The words hang in the air between us like smoke. and I can see him processing what I just said, trying to figure out his next move. Behind him, Jim's voice is still coming through the phone, asking if he should call back later, but Charles doesn't seem to hear him anymore. This is it. The moment I've been building towards since that night, I overheard him talking about blood being thicker than marriage licenses. This is me finally standing up, finally saying enough is enough, finally choosing my own dignity over a paycheck. I turn to walk out, but Charles isn't done yet. "You'll never get a reference from me," he calls after me, his voice cracking slightly like he's not used to people walking away from him mid-conversation. I stop at his door and look back at him. This man who married off his daughter to secure a loyal employee, who spent 5 years taking credit for my work while keeping me just grateful enough to stick around. "I won't need one," I tell him, and this time when I walk away, I don't look back. Charles thought he was calling my bluff, sitting there behind his overpriced desk with that smug look he gets when he thinks he's got all the cards. "You'll never get a reference from me," he'd said, like that was supposed to send me crawling back with my tail between my legs, begging for forgiveness and promising to be a good little employee who knows his place. What Charles doesn't understand, what he's never understood, is that this industry isn't as big as people think. Logistics and supply chain management might sound fancy and corporate, but at the end of the day, it's still a small world where everybody knows everybody, where your reputation travels faster than gossip at a church potluck. I'd been smart about this, smarter than Charles gave me credit for. While he was busy grooming his golden boy nephew and planning my professional funeral, I'd been quietly updating my resume, reaching out to old contacts, testing the waters to see what was out there for a guy like me. Not because I was planning to leave. Hell, 2 weeks ago, I was still hoping things might work out, but because Brielle had drilled it into my head that I needed to have options. "Never put all your eggs in one basket," she'd said after another one of those dinner parties where I came home feeling like I'd been kicked in the teeth. Especially when the basket belongs to someone who doesn't respect you. The first person I'd reached out to was Olive Brooks at Horizon Tech. Olive and I had worked together about 7 years ago when she was still climbing the corporate ladder at Morrison Industries, back before she jumped ship to become managing director at one of the fastest-growing logistics companies in the Southwest. She's tough as nails, smart as hell, and doesn't give a damn about your pedigree if you can get the job done. I'd sent her a casual email 3 weeks ago, nothing formal, just a "hey, how are things going? Would love to catch up over coffee sometime" kind of message. She'd responded the same day, which should have told me something right there. "Marcus, great to hear from you. I've been following your work at Alden Ventures through the industry reports. Impressive stuff with the Phoenix Distribution Network. Let's definitely grab lunch soon." Then there was Rudy Marlowe at Westline Logistics. Rudy's one of those guys who's been in the business since before computers, started loading trucks when he was 18, and worked his way up to regional operations manager through pure grit and determination. He'd been trying to poach me for 2 years, sending me Christmas cards with little notes like, "Doors always open if you get tired of working for amateurs." The thing about this industry is that results speak louder than diplomas, and my results had been speaking pretty damn loudly for the past 5 years. The Phoenix Distribution Network that Olive mentioned, that was my baby, a logistical nightmare that everyone said couldn't be done, until I figured out how to cut shipping times by 30% and reduce costs by almost 20%. The Morrison contract that Charles was so worried about losing? I'd been the point person on that account for 3 years, built a relationship with their procurement team that went way beyond just vendor-client bullshit. People talk in this business. They know who's really doing the work and who's just taking credit for it. They know that Charles Alden inherited his company from his daddy and has been coasting on family money and political connections ever since. They know that the real brains behind Alden Ventures' recent success has been the guy who married the boss's daughter and never got the recognition he deserved. So when I walked out of Charles's office with my dignity intact and my resignation letter delivered, I wasn't walking into the unknown. I was walking toward opportunity that had been waiting for me to grow a spine and reach for it. My phone buzzed before I'd even made it back to my desk. Text message from Olive. "Heard through the grapevine that you might be exploring new opportunities. Coffee this afternoon? I've got something that might interest you." The grapevine. Jesus, news travels fast in this business. I hadn't even cleaned out my desk yet, and already people were talking. But that's the thing about having a reputation. When you've spent years doing good work, people notice when you become available. I texted her back, Coffee sounds great. 3 p.m. at Brewster's. Perfect. And Marcus? Bring your resume. While I was typing my response, my work phone rang. Rudy Marlowe's name popped up on the caller ID, and I almost laughed out loud. Marcus! His gravelly voice boomed through the receiver. Tell me it's true. Tell me you finally told that pompous-ass father-in-law of yours to shove it. News travels fast, I said, glancing around the office to see if anyone was listening. Jack was in Charles's office now, probably getting an emergency briefing on damage control, while the rest of the team pretended to work while obviously trying to figure out what all the shouting had been about. Faster than bad checks, my friend. So what's your plan? Please tell me you're not going to waste time with one of those corporate headhunter assholes who'll promise you the moon and deliver a pay cut. I'm exploring my options, I said, keeping it professional even though part of me wanted to tell Rudy exactly what I thought about Charles and his whole nepotistic empire. Well, explore this. Westline's opening a new Southwest division. We need someone who knows the territory, knows the players, and isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Salary's negotiable, benefits are solid, and best of all, you'd be working for people who actually respect talent over family trees. I could hear Jack's voice through Charles's office door, high-pitched and nervous, probably asking what he was supposed to do about the Morrison renewal without me there to hold his hand. Part of me felt bad for the kid. He hadn't asked to be thrown into this mess, hadn't asked to be the weapon Charles used to cut me down to size. But that was Charles's problem now, not mine. Send me the details, Rudy, I said. I'll take a look. Already in your inbox, along with the contact info for our HR director. Marcus, I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass. This industry needs guys like you. Guys who actually know what they're doing instead of just talking a good game. Charles Alden just made the biggest mistake of his professional life, and his loss is going to be somebody else's gain. After I hung up, I sat at my desk for a minute, looking around at the office that had been my second home for 5 years. The motivational poster on the wall that said, "Teamwork makes the dream work." The coffee-stained carpet that maintenance never quite managed to clean properly. The view of the parking lot where I'd spent countless lunch breaks eating sandwiches in my car while working through vendor problems on my phone. I wasn't going to miss this place. But more importantly, I was starting to realize that this place was going to miss me a hell of a lot more than I was going to miss it. You know what they say about watching a train wreck? You can't look away even when you know it's going to be ugly as hell. That's what my last 2 weeks at Alden Ventures felt like, except I wasn't just watching the wreck happen. I was living in the middle of it while trying to maintain some shred of professional dignity. I could have been petty about it. God knows I had every reason to be. I could have walked out that Friday afternoon and left Jack to figure out 5 years' worth of systems and relationships on his own. Could have let Charles deal with the fallout of promoting an inexperienced kid over the guy who actually knew how to run the operation. Part of me wanted to do exactly that. Wanted to watch the whole thing burn down from a safe distance while sipping a beer and saying, "I told you so." But here's the thing about being a professional. It's not something you can turn on and off like a light switch. It's either who you are or it isn't. And I've never been the kind of guy who can walk away from people who are counting on me, even when their boss is a backstabbing asshole who thinks family means blood and nothing else. The team I'd trained over the years, Janet from accounting, Mike from shipping, Sarah who handled client communications, they didn't deserve to get caught in the crossfire of Charles's nepotism experiment. These were good people who'd busted their asses alongside me, who'd stayed late when deadlines got tight, and came in on weekends when emergencies popped up. They'd trusted me to have their backs, and I wasn't about to screw them over just because their boss had screwed me. And then there were the clients. Companies like Morrison Industries and Westfield Manufacturing who'd built relationships with me personally over the years, who called my direct line when they had problems because they knew I'd get things sorted out fast and right the first time. These weren't just account numbers on a spreadsheet. They were real businesses with real people depending on our services to keep their operations running smooth. So I stayed, and I worked my ass off for 2 weeks, while watching Jack Monroe slowly realize that managing logistics operations isn't something you learn from textbooks and case studies. The kid tried, I'll give him that. He asked questions, took notes, even stayed late a couple nights trying to understand the vendor database I'd spent 3 years building from scratch. But there's a difference between understanding how something works and actually knowing how to make it work when everything goes sideways. Which brings me to the Portstone manufacturing disaster. Portstone had been one of our biggest accounts for 4 years, a reliable client who shipped heavy machinery parts across the Southwest and trusted us to coordinate everything from customs paperwork to final delivery. Their logistics manager, Tom Brennan, was old school, the kind of guy who valued relationships over contracts and expected you to answer your phone when he called, even if it was 6 p.m. on a Friday. Jack's first week flying solo, Tom calls with an emergency. 3 containers of critical parts sitting in Long Beach, customs hold because of some paperwork snafu, and Portstone's assembly line scheduled to shut down Monday morning if those parts don't make it to Phoenix by Sunday night. This is the kind of crisis that happens maybe twice a year, the kind that separates the professionals from the pretenders. I'm at my desk, supposedly training Jack on quarterly reporting procedures, when his phone rings. I watch him answer, see his face go pale as Tom explains the situation, watch him fumble through our customs broker contact list like he's never seen it before. Mr. Brennan, Jack says, his voice getting higher with each word. Let me check on that and get back to you. He hangs up and looks at me with pure panic in his eyes. Marcus, I need help. There's some problem with customs in Long Beach, and this guy's talking about shutting down production lines, and I don't even know who we use for customs clearance. I could have told him to figure it out himself. Could have reminded him that he's the director now, that this is exactly the kind of decision-making he's getting paid the big bucks to handle. Instead, I pulled up the contact list, called our customs broker directly, and spent the next 4 hours coordinating with 3 different agencies to get those containers cleared and loaded onto emergency transport. By Sunday morning, the parts were in Phoenix and Portstone's assembly line started up right on schedule. Tom Brennan called Jack personally to thank him for pulling off another miracle, and Jack accepted the praise like he'd done anything more than hold the phone while I worked. But that was just the beginning. Over the next week, I watched Jack stumble through vendor negotiations he didn't understand, approve shipping routes that made no financial sense, and schedule deliveries that conflicted with driver availability. Every day brought a new crisis, and every day I found myself stepping in to clean up the mess before it became a disaster. The emergency protocols I developed over 5 years, who to call when shipments went missing, how to reroute deliveries around weather delays, which vendors could be trusted to handle rush orders. Jack had no clue about any of it. I started documenting everything, writing out step-by-step procedures for situations that used to be second nature to me. Not because I wanted to help Jack succeed. Hell no. I did it because I could see the writing on the wall, could see that Alden Ventures was about to lose clients, and I didn't want the people I'd worked with to get blamed for management stupidity. Charles, meanwhile, was getting more desperate by the day. His emails went from politely asking me to make sure Jack has everything he needs, to practically begging me to consider staying on in a consulting capacity to help with the transition. Each message was a little more frantic than the last, and I could practically smell the fear through my computer screen. The man who'd been so confident about Jack's potential 2 weeks ago was starting to realize that potential doesn't mean shit when you've got 3 major accounts threatening to jump ship and a nephew who thinks logistics management is something you can learn from YouTube videos. But I kept showing up, kept doing the work, kept making sure that when I walked out that door for the last time, no one could say I'd burned the place down on my way out. Because that's the difference between a professional and an amateur. Professionals clean up their messes, even when someone else made them. Tuesday morning of my final week, I'm sitting at my desk updating the vendor emergency contact list, because apparently knowing who to call when shit hits the fan isn't something they teach at Wharton, when Charles's secretary, Mrs. Rodriguez, appears next to my cubicle like a ghost materializing out of thin air. Mr. Hayes, she says in that careful tone she uses when Charles is having one of his moods. Mr. Alden would like to see you in his office when you have a moment. When you have a moment. That's corporate speak for drop whatever you're doing and get your ass in here right now, but delivered with enough politeness that Charles can pretend he's being respectful. Mrs. Rodriguez has been Charles's secretary for 12 years, and she's got that diplomatic thing down to an art form. She knows exactly what kind of shit storm has been brewing since I handed in my resignation, and the look in her eyes tells me she's rooting for me. Tell him I'll be right there, I say, saving my work and taking a deep breath. I've been expecting this conversation for days, watching Charles get more agitated as the reality of my departure sinks in. Yesterday, I caught him standing outside Jack's office, just listening to the poor kid struggle through a phone call with one of our freight brokers. And the expression on Charles's face was pure panic, barely held in check. Charles's office looks different somehow when I walk in. Smaller, maybe, or just less impressive than it used to be. He's not behind his desk this time. Instead, he's sitting in one of the leather chairs he usually reserves for important clients, trying to look casual and friendly, like we're just two guys having a chat instead of employer and soon-to-be former employee. "Marcus," he says, gesturing to the chair across from him with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "Sit down, please. I think we need to talk." I sit, but I don't relax. I can smell desperation on him like cheap cologne, and I know whatever's coming next is going to be some combination of manipulation, bribery, and emotional blackmail disguised as a business conversation. "I've been thinking," he starts, leaning forward with his hands clasped together like he's about to share some profound wisdom. "About your resignation, about the transition, about what's best for the company moving forward. And I think maybe we were a little hasty in how we handled the promotion situation." Hasty. Like promoting your nephew over your son-in-law was some kind of innocent oversight, instead of a calculated power play that he'd been planning for months. "I'm listening," I say, keeping my voice neutral even though part of me wants to laugh at whatever bullshit he's about to try to sell me. "What if we created a new position?" he continues, warming up to his pitch like a used car salesman who thinks he's found the perfect sucker. "Associate Director of Operations. You'd work alongside Jack, help him learn the ropes, but you'd have your own title, your own authority. Jack would be the director in name, but you'd both report directly to me. Think of it as co-management." Co-management. Jesus Christ, he actually said that with a straight face. Like I'm supposed to be grateful for the opportunity to babysit his nephew while pretending we're equals, like slapping a fancy title on a shit sandwich is going to make it taste better. "And the salary?" I ask, because I might as well hear the whole ridiculous offer before I turn it down. 15% increase, he says quickly, like he's been expecting that question. Plus performance bonuses tied to departmental efficiency metrics. And of course, when Jack's ready to move up to regional management, which could be sooner than you think, the director position would naturally be yours. Naturally, right? Because Charles Alden has such a stellar track record of promoting based on merit instead of bloodlines. I let the silence stretch out between us, watching him squirm in his expensive chair while he waits for my response. He's trying to read my face, trying to figure out if his little bribe is working, if he's found the right combination of money and promises to make me forget about 5 years of being overlooked and undervalued. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," I finally say, leaning back in my chair. "You want me to stay here and train your nephew to do the job I should have gotten in the first place, while pretending that we're somehow equal partners in this arrangement?" "It's not about pretending, Marcus. It's about building a stronger management team, creating opportunities for growth." "Charles," I interrupt, and something in my voice makes him stop talking. "I'm not going to babysit your nephew while he figures out how to do my job. I'm not going to smile and nod while you call it co-management and pretend like this is some kind of promotion instead of what it really is. You panicking because you realize Jack can't handle what you've given him." His face starts to redden, that familiar flush creeping up from his collar. "This is a generous offer, Marcus. Damn generous, considering the position you're putting us in by leaving during such a critical period." Critical period. Like my leaving is the problem instead of his decision to promote an unqualified kid over someone who's been carrying the department for 5 years. "What about Brielle?" He tries again, switching tactics like a politician who's lost the crowd. "What about Sophia? This affects them too, you know. Your family's security, your daughter's college fund." And there it is. The guilt trip I've been waiting for. The emotional manipulation disguised as concern for my family's welfare. He's going to make this about my responsibilities as a husband and father, like staying in a job where I'm treated like garbage is somehow the noble thing to do. "You're right," I say, standing up from my chair. "This does affect my family. It affects what kind of example I set for my daughter about self-respect and standing up for yourself. It affects whether my wife continues to watch me come home every day a little more beaten down than the day before." Charles stands too, probably thinking he can physically intimidate me into changing my mind. "You'll hurt your family with this decision, Marcus. You'll hurt people who care about you." I look at him. Really look at him. This man who married off his daughter to secure a loyal employee, who spent 5 years taking credit for my work while keeping me grateful for scraps from his table. This man who thinks loyalty is a one-way street that only flows uphill. No, Charles, I say, walking toward his door. You did that the day you chose nepotism over merit. You hurt my family when you decided that Jack's last name was more important than my 5 years of dedication. And you know what the really sad part is? You still don't get it. I pause at his doorway and look back at him one last time. I'm not leaving because I'm angry about the promotion. I'm leaving because I finally realized what you really think of me, and I'm not willing to accept that anymore. As I walk back to my desk, I can hear him calling my name, but I don't turn around. Some bridges are meant to be burned, and this one's been overdue for a long time. The Horizon Tech building sits in the heart of downtown, like a gleaming monument to what happens when a company actually invests in its future instead of coasting on daddy's money and political connections. 43 floors of steel and glass reaching toward the sky, with those massive silver doors at the entrance that reflect the morning sun like mirrors. Standing on the sidewalk outside, adjusting my tie for the 3rd time in 2 minutes, I can't help but think about the contrast with Alden Venture's tired old office building with its stained carpet and flickering fluorescent lights. My interview with Carmen Ease is scheduled for 10 a.m., and I'm here 20 minutes early because that's what professionals do. They show up prepared, on time, and ready to prove their worth. Not like Jack Monroe, who probably still needs GPS to find the bathroom in his own office building. The lobby is all polished marble and modern art, with a security desk manned by guys who look like they actually know what they're doing instead of just collecting paychecks. I give my name to the receptionist, a sharp-looking woman who greets me with a genuine smile instead of the barely concealed boredom I've gotten used to at Charles's place. Mr. Hayes, she says, checking her computer screen, Ms. Ease is ready for you. Take the express elevator to the 38th floor. Her assistant will meet you there. The elevator moves so smoothly, I barely feel it climbing. And when the doors open on 38, I'm looking at a workspace that actually looks like it belongs in the 21st century. Open floor plans that encourage collaboration, natural light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, people who look like they enjoy coming to work instead of counting down the hours until 5 o'clock. Carmen Ease's office overlooks the river, and she's standing at the window when her assistant shows me in. She turns around with a smile that reaches her eyes, extending her hand for a firm handshake that tells me everything I need to know about how she does business. Marcus, she says, gesturing toward a conference table by the window instead of making me sit across from her desk like some kind of supplicant. Great to finally meet in person. I've been following your work at Alden Ventures for years. Following my work. Not Charles's work, not the company's work, but mine specifically. It's been so long since someone recognized my individual contributions that I almost don't know how to respond. The Phoenix distribution network was particularly impressive, she continues, settling into her chair with a coffee mug that says, "World's okayest boss." The kind of self-deprecating humor that Charles would never understand. Cutting shipping times by 30% while reducing costs. That's the kind of innovative thinking we need here at Horizon Tech. We talk for an hour about logistics challenges, about the changing landscape of supply chain management, about the difference between companies that embrace change and companies that resist it until they're forced to adapt or die. Carmen doesn't just ask about my experience. She asks about my vision, my ideas for improving efficiency, my thoughts on where the industry is heading. Here's the thing, Marcus, she says, leaning forward with the kind of intensity that tells me she's about to get serious. We're expanding our Southwest operations. New facility in Phoenix, direct partnerships with manufacturers in Mexico, the whole 9 yards. We need someone who understands the territory, who has the relationships and the expertise to make it work from day one. What kind of position are we talking about? I ask, trying to keep the excitement out of my voice. Lead Director of Southwest Operations, she says without hesitation. Your own team, your own budget, full authority to structure things however you think works best. No co-management bullshit, no training your replacement. Just you, running the show the way you know it should be run. The salary she mentions makes my head spin, 40% higher than what Charles was paying me, plus performance bonuses that could push it even higher. Better health insurance, better retirement plan, 3 weeks paid vacation starting immediately instead of the 5-day maximum Charles allowed. But the real selling point isn't the money, though God knows that doesn't hurt. It's the respect. It's Carmen talking to me like I'm a professional whose opinion matters, like I'm someone whose expertise is valued instead of just tolerated. I have to ask, Carmen says, her expression getting more serious. Why are you leaving Alden Ventures? 5 years is a long time to walk away from, especially when you've built something as successful as that Phoenix network. I could give her the diplomatic answer, something about seeking new challenges and opportunities for growth. But Carmen strikes me as someone who appreciates honesty, someone who's dealt with enough corporate bullshit to recognize it when she hears it. Charles Alden promoted his nephew over me. I say simply, kid's got an MBA from Wharton and 3 months of experience. I've got 5 years of results and a track record of success. Family Connections won the day. Carmen nods like she's heard this story before, like she knows exactly how the old boys network operates and why companies like Alden Ventures keep losing talent to places like Horizon Tech. Their loss, she says, standing up and extending her hand again. Welcome to Horizon Tech, Marcus. When can you start? 2 weeks later, I'm cleaning out my desk at Alden Ventures for the last time, packing up 5 years of memories and frustrations into a cardboard box that doesn't seem nearly big enough to hold everything I'm leaving behind. Jack avoids eye contact when he walks past, probably still trying to figure out how to handle the Morrison account renewal without me there to hold his hand. Charles hasn't spoken to me since our last conversation in his office, which suits me just fine. I leave my security badge on Charles's desk along with a folder containing detailed instructions for every major account, emergency contact numbers, and step-by-step procedures for handling the kind of crises that Jack will inevitably face. Not because I owe Charles anything, but because the people who work here, the ones who didn't choose their boss, deserve better than to watch everything fall apart because of one man's pride and stupidity. Walking out through those glass doors for the last time, carrying my box of personal items and my head held high, I don't look back. Tomorrow morning, I start fresh at Horizon Tech, working for people who value competence over connections, results over relationships. For the first time in 5 years, I'm actually excited about going to work. 6 months into my new life at Horizon Tech, I'm sitting in my corner office, my actual corner office with windows that look out over the mountains instead of a parking lot. When Carmen walks in carrying a magazine with a grin that tells me she's got news. Take a look at this, she says, dropping the latest issue of Southwest Business Journal on my desk like it's Christmas morning. The cover story hits me like a punch to the gut, except instead of pain, it's pure satisfaction flowing through my veins. There's Charles Alden's face, looking about 10 years older than when I left, under a headline that reads, Alden Ventures loses 60% of major clients following management shakeup and nepotism allegations. I flipped through the article, and it's even better than the headline promised. Portstone Manufacturing terminated their contract after what the article diplomatically calls service delivery failures, but what I know was probably Jack screwing up another emergency shipment. Lancaster Group followed suit 3 weeks later, citing concerns about operational competency. Delmeyer Heavy Industries. The account I'd personally nursed back to health after their previous logistics provider screwed them over, jumped ship to our biggest competitor with a statement about seeking more experienced management. The article quotes an unnamed industry source saying, when you promote family over talent, this is what happens. Marcus Hayes was the operational backbone of that company, and losing him exposed just how thin their actual expertise really was. Gets better, Carmen says, settling into the chair across from my desk. Keep reading. The financial details are brutal. Stock price down 40%, layoffs across 3 departments, and a board of directors that's apparently decided Charles's leadership style isn't working out so well anymore. The article mentions that Charles stepped down to pursue other opportunities, which is corporate speak for got his ass fired by people who care more about profits than family loyalty. But the real kicker is buried in the last paragraph. Former regional director Jack Monroe, nephew of company founder Charles Alden, resigned his position last month to pursue additional education opportunities. Sources close to the company suggest Monroe's departure was related to operational difficulties following the loss of key personnel. Additional education opportunities. The kid went back to school, Probably to learn what he should have known before Charles handed him a job he wasn't qualified for. Part of me feels bad for Jack. He never asked to be thrown into that mess. Never asked to be the weapon Charles used to cut me down. But that's what happens when family politics collide with business reality. So what's the word on the street? I ask Carmen, though I'm pretty sure I already know the answer. Charles is scrambling to sell off assets and avoid lawsuits from investors who feel like they were misled about the company's stability. Word is he might lose the family compound in Scottsdale if things keep going south. Meanwhile, you've increased our Southwest Division's efficiency by 25% and landed 3 major contracts that your old competitors would kill for. I lean back in my chair, looking out at those mountains and thinking about how different my life is now. No more walking on eggshells around a boss who thinks I should be grateful for scraps. No more watching unqualified people get promoted over me because of whose blood runs in their veins. No more coming home exhausted from fighting battles I was never allowed to win. Carmen's right about the numbers. Our Southwest operations are crushing it. And it's not because I'm some kind of genius. It's because I'm finally working for people who let me do my job without interference, who judge results instead of resumes, who understand that trust and leadership can't be inherited like furniture. Charles never figured that out, and now he's paying the price. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor after all. A year and 3 months after walking out of Alden Ventures, I'm grabbing breakfast at Mickey's Diner near Sky Harbor Airport before catching a flight back to headquarters when I spot a familiar figure hunched over a corner booth. Jack Monroe sits alone with a cup of coffee and a textbook that's got supply chain management, principles and practices written across the cover in bold letters. The kid looks different, older somehow, like the past year has taught him things they don't cover in business school. His expensive suits have been replaced by jeans and a flannel shirt, and there's something in his posture that wasn't there before. Humility, maybe. Or just the weight of understanding how badly he'd screwed up. I could walk right past him, pretend I didn't see him, catch my flight, and get back to my successful new life without looking backward. But something about the way he's studying that textbook, like his life depends on learning every word, makes me stop. Mind if I sit? I ask, gesturing to the empty side of his booth. Jack looks up, and for a second I think he's going to bolt for the door. But then he closes the book and gives me a tired smile that's got more maturity in it than anything I ever saw when he was playing director. Marcus, he says, sliding the textbook to one side. I wondered when I might run into you. Phoenix isn't that big a town in our business. I signal the waitress for coffee and settle into the booth across from him. Up close, I can see the changes even clearer. The cocky confidence is gone, replaced by something that looks like genuine self-awareness. How's the studying going? I ask, nodding toward the textbook. Jack laughs, but it's not bitter. Harder than I thought it would be. Turns out there's a lot they don't teach you in general business classes about actually managing logistics operations. Who knew? Planning to get back into it. Eventually, yeah, but the right way this time. From the ground up, learning the business instead of just inheriting a title I never earned. He takes a sip of his coffee and looks me straight in the eye. I deserve none of it, Marcus. The promotion, the office, the responsibility, none of it. But you still helped me when everything started falling apart. I won't forget that. The waitress brings my coffee, and I add cream while thinking about how to respond. The truth is, I did help him, even when I could have let him drown. Not because I liked him or thought he deserved it, but because that's who I am. You got thrown into a game you weren't ready for, I tell him. Charles put you in an impossible situation and expected you to succeed without the tools or knowledge to make it work. That wasn't all, yo. Maybe not all of it, Jack says, but I should have known better. Should have told Uncle Charles the first needed more time, more training, more everything before taking on that kind of responsibility. Pride, I guess. I wanted to prove I could handle it. And now I know that wanting something and being ready for it are two completely different things. I'm working for a small freight company in Tucson, learning how trucks actually get loaded and what happens when deliveries go wrong. Making about a third of what I was making at Alden Ventures, and I've never been happier to clock in every morning. I can respect that. There's something to be said for a guy who's willing to admit his mistakes and start over the hard way. What about Charles? I ask, though I'm not sure I really want to know. Jack's expression darkens a little. Uncle Charles isn't talking to me much these days. Last I heard, he was trying to sell the business to avoid bankruptcy, but there aren't many buyers interested in a company that's lost most of its major accounts. Funny how things work out. We sit in comfortable silence for a while. Two guys who've been through the same storm from different sides. Jack's not the enemy anymore. Hell, he never really was. He was just a pawn in Charles's game, a weapon used against me that ended up backfiring spectacularly. When the check comes, I grab it before Jack can protest. Good luck with the studying, I tell him as we head toward the parking lot. And Jack, next time someone offers you a job you're not ready for, have the guts to say no. He nods, and I can see he means it. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way.